Hey guys, welcome back. Today we aren't just spilling the tea, we're spilling the feed. I am your host, Abbi Brooks, the Crowder FFA Vice President. We have Timmy and Dax and Meacham in the back. And today we're very excited to introduce our 2024-2025 Southeast Area Vice President, Titus Montgomery.
Hey everybody, like she said, my name is Titus. I have the pleasure of serving as the Southeast Area Vice President for the 2024-2025 year for the Oklahoma FFA Association. So very, very honored to be on the podcast today and really, really excited to see what you guys got to talk about.
What chapter were you a member of?
So I was a member of the Red Oak FFA Chapter. So we had about 60-ish students throughout my time there. Usually it's kind of the range that we had whenever we had members. And so started as an 8th grader, finished out as a senior, and then was able to go and serve our state organization and represent my chapter. And so, yeah, I was from Red Oak.
That's cool. How many years were you in FFA?
So I started as an 8th grader, so 5 years as an active member, and then 1 year as a state officer. So technically, I've been a part of the FFA for about 6 years now.
Do you count as so it's not an active member when you're a state officer?
So that's kind of a funny thing, because technically you are an active member until you receive your American degree. Right. And then once you get your American degree, it's like that is when you're officially you're done. And so it makes it to where you'll see some of these people that get their American star. And let's say you're getting your American star, you can wait until I think it's your junior year of college. I'm pretty sure is the last year. And so I've known people that have applied for proficiency awards starting freshman year of high school and continued to apply until about their junior year of college. And then they're done. You know what I mean? But once you get your American degree, that's when it's you can't apply for proficiency awards, you can't apply for American Star, and so you're done then. So I count it, but at the same time, I'm kind of that was when I was an FFA member, and then it kind of shifted into a different position as an FFA member for me.
It's always cool, especially with now we might be adding 7th graders. So it's you can start as a 7th grader and go all the way till your junior year of college.
It's so cool. It's so cool. When we were at National Convention, that was something that was a very, very hot topic, because we go to National Convention as a state officer and we sit in on some of these committees, and that is something that was brought up. And so Oklahoma will probably add some 7th grade programs, and that's going to be so cool, because it's now people are going to be in there for 7 years, and maybe you could count 8 years if someone was started as a 7th grader and was eventually elected state president. And so it's wow, you know what I mean?
How were you introduced to FFA?
So I was introduced to FFA. So I remember the first time that it was ever kind of brought up to me. And so I had shown livestock when I was a 4-H'er. So I started when I was a 1st grader and started out showing pigs. Started out with Hamps and Yorks was kind of my forte. And I showed until I was about a freshman in high school. But I first kind of got the introduction to FFA in general outside of the livestock industry when in the summer of what would be going in my 8th grade year, I was riding with my dad in the truck. We had just got back from Fort Smith, and we just got back from watching Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It was an amazing movie. I don't care what the critics have to say. I loved that movie. And so we were on our way back, and he started telling me, I was kind of at a crossroads in my life. I was kind of I stopped doing athletics. I go to a school that's very athletically driven. And I was like, Dad, what am I going to do? And he said, son, you're about to go into your 8th grade year, and you're going to be introduced to FFA. And so he had been in FFA in high school, and he had been the chapter treasurer, and he would always tell me about the position of the treasurer. And he can still say the treasurer's part, perfectly. And I'm like, what? How do you remember this all these years later? But he would tell me, he had told me about FFA and kind of had talked about it, but it was one of those things where he was not a super active member. He was active and did stuff, but he wasn't going out there and giving speeches, and he wasn't doing all that. And not that doesn't make you an active member. He just kind of was. Our FFA careers were kind of very different. And so he he had just kind of given me a broad spectrum, and he was like, just be ready. And so I go into my 8th grade year, and I'd always known my ag teacher, but had never fully understood FFA. And then I kind of got my introduction when I rolled into FFA, my first ag class as an 8th grader, on a knee scooter, because I had just had foot surgery a few weeks before, and rolled in on a knee scooter and hit the little ramp going into the ag building a little bit too hard and completely wiped out. And there was my ag teacher, Mr. Walker, looking at me. And mind you, I'd known him for years at this point. And so he says something, and he just was like, that was a stupid move, but come on, get up. And I'm like, well, technically I can't get up because I'm on my bad leg right now. Could you help me out? So I threw my hand up, and he helped me up. We get back on the scooter, and we roll into class. And right off the bat, it was like, yo, what is this place, man? We got awards everywhere. We got the blue and gold on the. Who are these pictures that we got? Or who are these people in these pictures on the wall? What are we doing? And so I had no idea what it truly was. And then he kind of went into it, and from there we just that was kind of my first introduction to FFA. So yeah, that was kind of mine. But what was kind of y'all's first introductions to FFA, I guess, if I'm allowed to ask that?
You want to go first, Dax?
Well, my mom, my aunt, and my grandpa is an ag teacher, so I've known around FFA for quite a while, and then I've showed pigs since I was, little. And then, so I knew I was going to take ag, but I didn't know really what it was. And then I got into Mr. Meachem's class, and then we went over a bunch of stuff this year. I did OCC. It was fun. We got 5th. Again, yeah. But yeah, it was probably when I was a baby. That's how I got introduced.
Yeah. So kind of a generational thing for you. Okay.
I wasn't really introduced other than my cousins were in FFA, and so I would see them at events and stuff at school, like the veterans thing and other stuff. Other than that, no, until freshman year. And I kind of started really liking it last year after state convention and all that stuff. And I think I really started liking it more.
Did your cousins go to Crowder?
Yes.
So you kind of knew the ag department and everything before?
Yes, I did.
My introduction to FFA was freshman year when we took the Intro to Ag class, and we got to do pretty much a broad variety of everything you could do in the FFA. And I did everything from technology and mechanics, which that's what I still do. And I also did OCC freshman year.
What type of member were you your first year?
So as an 8th grader, and this kind of goes back to, my 8th grade year was 2019 going into 2020. And we can all remember what happened in 2020. And so I didn't really get to have that spring as an FFA member for the first time until I was a freshman. And so as an 8th grader, I started out strong, and I'd done livestock judging for several years there. Now, of course, I only ever competed in contests that had no reasons because I was not good at giving reasons. I can give a speech. I cannot give a set of reasons to save my life. And so we started out as an 8th grader. I did OCC. Funny enough, I don't remember where it was. It may have been our Goodwill tour parts that we had. But I've told this story, and for FFA members that are listening, you may remember this, but I don't know if you guys ever got to hear it. But as an 8th grader, Mr. Walker had actually put me at the spot of president for OCC. And I was up there in front of the room, and he's like, you've got the personality, you've got the voice, you can do it. And I got up there, and when I tell you he told me after a couple of days, he said, you are the worst president I have ever seen. He said, you are terrible at this. And
Mr. Walker is very blunt. So.
He's very honest. He will tell you straight up, in which I was not good. I remember I practiced in front of my mom once, and she goes, are you supposed to sound like that up there? Are you supposed to like be looking like you're, sweat just dripping down you? Like, are you supposed to be? And I'm like, I don't know. And so one day we walk into class and he's like, all right, go to the back of the room. And I'm like, oh man, I'm getting put in the corner. Like, what happened? What did I do? I'm sorry, I'm not good at this part. And he's like, no. He's like, I want you to go be the VP. Well, his daughter Maddie was the VP. And I was like, what's going to happen to Maddie? I'm like, we got to have Maddie on this team. She's so much better than me. And he's like, no, Maddie's going to go be Prez. You go be VP. I was like, okay, all right. So we go back there. And as you guys will know that's competed in OCC, you start out with one part, and by the end of it, you basically know the whole routine. You know the whole parts. I think it's funny at state convention, people probably didn't notice this because the spotlight wasn't on me when it wasn't my part, but I was standing there going through the entire motions of OCC whenever it wasn't my turn. And so I get back there, and I say the VP's part, and he just like stops, and he's just like, whoa. And I'm like, oh gosh, what did I just do? I'm like, oh no. And he was like, that was so good. I was like, and he just hyped me up. And I was like, yo, that's right, my boy. You're my hype man. Okay. And so from there, I kind of got involved in it. And by the end of it, he's like, you're the best VP I've ever heard. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Went from the worst press to the best VP. Okay. And so that was kind of like my first kind of introduction to competing in FFA as an 8th grader. And then we kind of went through that, and then I went to MFE that fall, and that was a great time. MFE, you guys, what grade are you in now?
11th.
You're 11th?
Yeah.
Did you ever get to go to MFE? Mm-mm. No? Okay. So you guys know what Lead 360 is? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So you went last year, right?
Yeah, I went this year. Yeah. Well, technically last year.
We're in the summer now, so we're kind of moving on.
So MFE used to be... So Lead 360 used to be MFE and ALD, which stood for Made for Excellence and Advanced Leadership Development. So MFE was 8th, 9th, and 10th graders only. And then ALD was juniors and seniors. And so what they would do is same kind of format as Lead 360, except we would do it at hotels. And so you would be texting your buddy and being like, hey, are you going to MFE this weekend? And they'd be like, yeah. And you're like, okay, well, you're going to Oklahoma City or are you going to Tulsa? And they'd be like, I don't know. I just know I'm going this weekend. And so it was always a mess of like, man, I wish we had gotten tickets for going to the Renaissance Hotel and not the Hilton Garden Inn. You know what I mean? Like, and so you would go to MFE. I went as an 8th grader, had an absolute blast. They had a dance. They used to have a dance. So like we have a talent show at Lead 360. We used to have a dance that night. And so that's actually where I first learned a two-step. And I love dancing. I love two-stepping and swing dancing. So it was a great experience. And then went into Christmas break. And then from there, we turned around. I started prepping, learning my speech. And then lo and behold, the spring season kind of got canceled. So it kind of gave me a jump start on freshman year, though. So that was kind of how I was as an 8th grader in FFA.
Can you guys relate at all? Were you that outgoing and exciting? Or were you guys pretty shy,
I was very shy.
Kept to yourself?
Yes. I was not really much involved my freshman year. And then I started getting into it my sophomore year. So
I feel like we did quite a bit this year in the freshman group. We had a freshman livestock judging team. We had OCC. What else do we have? We went to Lead 360.
Yeah, we took a couple of you and a couple other freshmen to our livestock shows to just try to get people like interested in doing some different stuff. So yeah, we've definitely come out of our shells though, right?
Yeah. What were you involved in as a member of the Red Oak Chapter?
So I was... Have you guys ever heard the song "Live Like You Were Dying" by Tim McGraw? It's a very, very popular song,
I have.
Okay,
the old one did, yeah.
I was about to say, it's one of my most favorite songs. In fact, 2021, it was my most played song on Spotify Wrapped. And so, love that song. And basically in that song, it talks about, how are you going to live like you're dying? Say you're given a due date. How are you going to live? What are you going to do? And that's kind of how my FFA career was. I did anything and everything that I could. You know, going into freshman year, I got to go to alumni camp for the first time that summer. And I was very iffy about the organization, but I enjoyed alumni camp. And we went into freshman year, and, you know, I started out with Green Hand. And in freshman year, I was able to do very, very well in Green Hand. Was very blessed, and I placed at, you know, I was a state finalist. I went and was fourth in the state. I mean, I still remember the question I got out on, and how, you know, everybody always says, "Oh, well, if I hadn't got out, I knew the rest of those answers." And I will be 100% honest with you. I did not know the answer to the question that I answered, but I knew the answer to just about 5 other questions in that order. And then it just completely, I was done. I was like, nope. I was like, I would not have made it. I would not have made it past third place. I knew. So I was very happy where I was. But as a freshman, I did Green Hand. I did livestock judging. I did livestock judging all through high school in the fall. And then, you know, I went into my freshman spring and I did the creed. And I had a speech in natural resources. And so that was actually the first year I got to debut my paddlefish speech, which I called Russians, Rivers, and a Row. And so it was kind of a speech about how the Russian mafia was coming into Oklahoma and Missouri and illegally harvesting paddlefish for their eggs. And so what they would do is they'd take the eggs, and paddlefish are a close relative to sturgeon. And so sturgeon create caviar. And in order for you to get caviar, you have to kill the fish. And so it's a very, very non-renewable resource type industry. And so you're taking these 20-year-old fish and just killing them, taking the eggs and processing them and making hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes for some of the rarest beluga sturgeon on the planet. Well, guess what happens when you do that for a long, long time? The sturgeon populations drop. And so then what did they do? They went, oh, we can come to the United States where they've got all these paddlefish populations. And the paddlefish have eggs just like the sturgeon, just a little bit different. And if we process them, we can make a major profit margin. And it was crazy. And they did this for a long time. And so my speech was about that and how we were able to crack down on it and how it's a current problem and how we need to fix this and do all that. And so then I gave the creed. I was blessed again to be able to go to state with the creed. And I went up there. Usually people are like, when you're at the state speech contest, they're like, if you're the last spot or the second to last spot to go, you're set. You're going to make the top 5 automatically. You should win the whole thing. I didn't know that. And so I get the number 10 spot and everybody's like, oh, you're going to win this thing. You know it. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, is this different? And I go in there and just completely bobble it. I mean, I did so bad. And a lot of people were like, oh, you threw your chance away. And I was like, no, like, that was a learning experience. And so as a freshman, I did creed, Green Hand, livestock judging, and gave a speech. And so that was kind of freshman year. And then I kind of went into sophomore year, and I was like, all right, this is when I'm going to start picking it up. And so I started out that fall.
You're going to pick it up from the FFA creed, state speeches. And
yeah, I'm like, I gotta fix this, because I was like, I gotta get my licks back. You know what I mean? I went up there and I got my tail whipped. I'm like, and rightfully so, I did bad on my part. And so I was like, I gotta get that chance. I gotta go back. And so I started out sophomore year, and I was like, all right, this speech, this is my ticket to state. I'm like, I'm gonna start cooking. And so I just start getting on the phone with all these game wardens and all these people I'm mentioning in my speech. I'm tracking down their emails from old, like, you know, before Facebook and stuff, there was like these like old like hunting websites and all these old fishing websites that you could go to, and they'd have chat rooms where like people are talking like, you know, hey, here's a bass I caught and all this. I went and tracked down these articles, these Field and Stream articles, found these guys' emails. This is like a 20-year-old article. And I found this email, and I just start, hey, please tell me this email still works. Like, how can I get in contact with you? And I just started calling them and contacting them. And I was like, I'm ready. I'm locked in. So that's also when I started doing 2 things that I really, really loved. I started competing in AFR, their speech contests that they do in the fall, and got involved with that student organization, which led to some greater things down the road. And that is also when I started showing grass. And so freshman year, I mentioned I had stopped showing livestock. And so what I had done is I had gotten a youth loan, and I had bought a herd of cattle, and that was kind of my main SAE. And then sophomore year, I started showing grass. And so what that means is at Tulsa State Fair and Oklahoma State Fair, you can compete in indoor agronomy exhibits. So I don't know if any of you guys are ag mech people, but if you ever make like horseshoe art, or you make a trailer, or you do, I think there's like an outdoor exhibit like category where like you can make like porch swings and so like stuff like that. You can compete with that at Tulsa.
Or like a really cool table with an ice chest in it, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. So stuff like that. I'm not very handy when it comes to that kind of stuff because just about everything in the shop scares me to death because I've been cut, burned, I just shocked a million times by stuff on accident. So I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna let the professionals handle that. So what I did was you can compete with these agronomy exhibits. Usually it's for people out west that have all these acres of a wheat field where they can harvest some grain and put it into a grain box and show, hey, I have the best wheat sample or the best corn sample, or hey, I have the best sample of this native grass, and they make these bundles. Well, I was like, I ain't got no idea about all this, but my ag teacher knew a little bit, and so he guided me through it, and I was very blessed to be able to continue to compete in that all the way to my senior year, but it was one of those things where I had no idea. I was starting new with that, just like I did my freshman year with speech. I knew about it and I knew what to do, but I did not know the ins and outs. And so I kind of went into it blind, and I placed first in my class at Tulsa, which is like crazy because usually like that's where you don't do that if it's your first time. And I was blown away. And so started out with that, and then I did AFR speech later that fall. I was very blessed, and I won the state speech contest in my category at AFR. And I was like, yeah, I'm that guy. Like, y'all better watch out. And then the spring came around, and I got humbled real quick. I like to think of my sophomore spring as my make or break point within the organization because I was so locked in. I mean, I was ready to rock and roll, and I was ready to just do all this. And I made it to my area contest in my speech, and I got third, which destroyed me because I was so locked in. I was like, I got this. And I went in there and what? I'm like, what happened? I'm like, I went to state last year. And it was one of those things where my mindset was wrong. My mindset was, well, I'm a winner. I should do this. I got this. I got this in the bag. And it wasn't, hey, I'm going to go try my best. It was, oh, I'm going to go try my best. And if my best isn't good enough, it's their problem, not mine.
I think every FFA member kind of has an experience like that. When I was showing, we do this thing in California. It's called master showmanship. It's if you get first or second in your species, then you can compete in the one. It's like your all-around showmanship here. But what we did was everyone grabs a lamb and shows all the lambs, and then everyone goes to the pigs and shows those. My probably sophomore year of high school, I got third place behind the two best showmen at our county. They graduate. I go in the next year, and I'm like, all right, I got it. I was third last year behind two people that left. That year I got, what's the green one? Is that like ninth? The green ribbon? It's like 8th or 9th place. It's like totally failed because I was like, all right, I already got it. This is too easy. You guys have any experiences of like getting so close and then just falling flat? Maybe at Tulsa or OYE or something?
Yeah. Well, in showing you get humbled a lot. And one that I like to talk about just because it's funny. So we are at Arkansas Oklahoma State Fair. I have the champion hamp and champion cross. I'm pretty sure. No, I just have champion cross. So I go in there, and I'm thinking we're gonna win it. Everybody else does, and then we go in there, and I see the judge just picks the Hereford. I'm just blown out of my mind, and we all were just laughing about it. But that was probably one of the ones that humbled me.
I really liked what you said earlier about you didn't know a lot about a certain subject, and then your ag teacher helped you out with it. Do you guys have anything that you're interested in and you may not know a lot about it, but you're like, if I could get the help, maybe I could do really good in it?
I'd actually have to say ag mech because, I mean, I've watched my dad work in the shop, and he loves to build. He builds things all the time. And I've watched him do it, and I know a little bit, but I really wish I knew more.
That's a really fun one. We can, because we don't compete in like ag mech or anything at Tulsa or anything, because we don't have the best coming out right away. I think that we learn as we go throughout the year. So if we can get a couple kids that get ag mech twice in a year, that'd be awesome. But it's always like 1 year you're ag mech, 1 year ag comm, 1 year you're animal science. But if we can get kids that were in it 1 year, learn the foundations, and then the next year we can build some cool things for Tulsa. And OIE does one now too, so that'd be cool. If you don't have anything, you can go to the next one. Okay.
How did FFA help you develop in your life?
Well, I would have to say, this kind of goes back to what I was saying kind of earlier, It was one of those moments, like, I got hit, and I was like, okay. And leading up to that point in my life, I was one of those people, like, I wanted to go out, and I'm still like this. I'm still very competitive, but I had the wrong mindset for a long time. And I always like to compare it as, and this is how FFA really changed me. I went from having this winner's mindset to a champion's mindset. And so kind of like how I like to look at that is, a winner is someone that's, I got to win. If I don't win, it's over. It's their fault. I did nothing wrong. Why did they do this to me? I need to win. If I can't win, what has happened? Whereas with a champion's mindset, you're going to go in there and try your hardest. And at the end of the day, if someone beat you, you need to go walk up to them afterwards and say, hey, man, that was awesome. How did you do that? You see, that's the difference between them. You need to go and congratulate them, and you need to kind of focus on how you're going in there. And a winner is someone that's, okay, I'm going to go win, and you lose in the end. With having a champion's mindset, you just got beat. That's okay. Go home. You wake up the next morning, eat you some Eggo waffles, and you go on and say, hey, let's go conquer the world. Let's go do this. And so that was something that FFA really helped guide me through, is my mindset changed, and immediately, I had a different outlook on life. I was to the point where I was like, man, like, how does this happen? And I was like, but you know what? I got beat. That's okay. Now, next week, I don't have to worry about going to the state speech contest. I can kind of take a moment to relax. I've been running and gunning all spring. Let's take a moment and let's go enjoy state convention. And it was really a turning point for me in my mindset. But then, and kind of I want to hear about this, with you guys. But, I kind of, as an 8th grader, I didn't mention this earlier because I was waiting to bring it up. But did you guys have kind of that formulative moment in your FFA career where you were like, I'm hooked, I'm ready to go? It wasn't, oh, I'm a part of FFA, I'm doing this. It was, for example, why are you guys sitting here at the podcast today? It's a Thursday, it's June 5th, in the middle of the summer. You guys could be out fishing. You guys could be at home laying in bed. It's 10:44. You could be at home laying in bed watching TikTok right now. What was kind of y'all's hook in FFA? I'd like to hear that, and then I'll share mine, and it'll kind of help answer my question. But
mine, well, I was doing it all, and I was having a pretty good time. But what really wanted me to get more into it was probably the Loot 360 camp. Going and talking to all these people I don't know. I was scared at first, but then I started talking to people in my cabin, and we just had a great time. And I wasn't in any of my friends groups, so I just had to make friends. And listen to the speeches that the state officers give, and it was just really inspiring and made me realize that I really want to do this, like ag.
That's awesome. What about you guys?
So, how do I start this? I wasn't sure about this whole thing until I knew I could do photography in this podcast. And then, because I was not a huge fan of like livestock or showing in general, shooting sports, nothing to that concern. And I found out I could just do photography, this, everything else other than animals. And so I just kind of got hooked, like you said. And now we're here. So, yeah.
That's awesome. What about you, Timmy?
I'd say the moment I got hooked was after I did OCC freshman year. And while we only got 5th place, it kind of opened up, it broadened my horizons, because I thought I would just do ag mech and shooting sports and stay within that realm. But after I did OCC, that kind of broadened my horizons, and it got me to do more. And I probably wouldn't be an officer if it weren't for OCC. And there's also, I didn't get to mention it earlier, but I think it's amazing how you went from being like me freshman year, because I also had the vice president part in OCC. And I remember my parts. It's just when I got up there to speak, I was nervous. And I think it's amazing how you went from being like me to doing OCC at state convention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I love y'all's guys' stories. I mean, that's what's so great about this organization is we all have a different why, a different reason as to why we do things and why we're still here. Because anybody can just take an ag class. And, a lot of these schools, I know with my school, a lot of my friends that took our ag communications class, well, you can use that as your like speech credit now in the state of Oklahoma. And so it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to take this. And there's nothing wrong with that because you're able to get that kind of agricultural education input. But, I mentioned earlier, I started out FFA in 8th grade. And I was at that crossroads in life. And yes, that was kind of when I got hooked and I first got introduced. But my why did not develop until about 2 weeks after I joined the organization. I mentioned earlier, sophomore year, that was a really pivotal point in my life where I was like, I had this different mindset about it. But the reason I had gotten to that point in FFA was as an 8th grader, I went to Colt Conference. And if you guys are chapter officers or going to be chapter officers, you'll attend this conference called Colt Conference, which is Chapter Officer Leadership Training. And we have one for each area. I can proudly say I'm probably one of the only people in the state that was an FFA member that went that has been to the last 6. Because I started as an 8th grader and I went to my last one this year as the Southeast Area Vice President. And at this conference, I felt like a nobody. And I didn't just feel like a nobody at this conference, but I had felt that for a long time in my life. I felt like, even though I was the tallest of my siblings, even though that I was taller than some grown men at my church, I felt like whenever I walked through the halls of the school, or I just simply went to one of my siblings' ball games, or was even at a family function with my extended family, I felt like I had no place. And I felt like, in other words, I felt like a nobody. And that was really hard. Really, really hard on me. And I went to Colt Conference. I mean, I remember getting the phone call with my mom in the car, and Mr. Walker calls me and he goes, hey, if you can get full official dress other than a jacket and a tie by 6 a.m. tomorrow, he said, meet at the ag building and you're hopping in and you're going to Colt Conference with us. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what full official dress is, but my dad's a pastor, so we'll go dig in his closet. You know what I mean? And so we go dig through my dad's closet. And, my dad has went through very many different sizes of clothing, as he's gotten older. We still wear the same kind of clothing. And so it was like, when I was an 8th grader, I just wore an XL instead of a 2X. And so it was like I went in there and I was able to find one of his old white dress shirts. And I was able to find an old pair of black slacks and a pair of black dress shoes. The only thing I didn't have, well, and I found a belt too. The only thing I didn't have was pure black socks. So I actually went to my first cult conference wearing gray and black striped socks. And Mr. Walker was like, "What are you doing? Oh my, we could have got you socks," like all this. But we go to cult conference, and it was there where I felt like a nobody, that I was treated like a somebody by a guy by the name of Drew Hardaway. Now, you guys may not know Mr. Hardaway. He's an ag teacher now, and so I think you'd probably know him, and you've met him before.
The name sounds familiar. I think
He was the state president my 8th grade year, and he was my position as a state officer the year before as the Southeast Area Vice President. He was from Batiste, Oklahoma. And so, great guy. And this guy who did not know me treated me like I was a somebody when I felt like a nobody. And that was a really big turning point for me. And that is, that kind of goes back to my why in FFA. And that's why I asked you guys earlier, why are y'all still here? And you guys each have your own why as to why you're here even today. And so that was kind of how FFA has kind of really changed me and impacted my life. Along with, I talk about sophomore year. There was a lot of great pivotal moments, but I look at those two as, this is my why, and this was why I stayed, but my application was wrong. And, something that we're taught as state officers when we facilitate, and facilitation is like when we do workshops, and, you go to Lead 360 and you sit there and Rhett or Jason Wexler or Kelly, and they kind of do these different things. Those are workshops. That's facilitating. Something we're taught in facilitation is you have to have your why, like what are you doing this for? What are we supposed to learn? But you also have to have your application, and your application has to be right. It has to align with that why. And I think for a long time, my why was I want to make others that feel like a nobody feel like a somebody. I want to make others feel like the celebrity that they are. But my application was wrong. And so something that was really great that I attribute a lot to my kind of change in mentality and change of who I was actually 2 weeks after state convention, I started my own podcast called the Brag on Ag podcast. And that was where my why of making others feel like a celebrity, my application for a long time was wrong. My application came into effect. And now my why was to make others feel like a celebrity. Well, how am I going to applicate that in my daily life? I'm going to start a podcast where I'm bragging on agriculture and the FFA and how it has positively impacted the lives of students, former students, mentors, and just about anybody. And so that's kind of how the FFA, has really changed me into who I am today. Was I had my why, I had my application, and so then I was able to go out and really applicate my purpose, my message. And so that was a long answer to your question, but that kind of helps drive it all into that nice little bow ribbon on top. So
I think you also answered her next question about your Brag on Ag podcast.
Yeah.
So
what
you want to talk about the Brag on Ag podcast with him for a little bit?
Yeah.
Kind of get some tips on our podcast.
What motivated you to start your podcast?
So it all stems back to, my hometown, and you guys would understand this. Small schools, what are they really, really honed in, focused on 9 times out of 10? Are our ball teams the best that they can be? And there's nothing wrong with that. I can sit there and I can watch a basketball game and enjoy every second of it. So much so that I was the voice of the Eagles. I was the basketball commentator from 7th grade to my senior year. Like, I love basketball. Baseball, not as much, mainly because of my vision problems, I was catching more fly balls with my face than I was with my glove. And so it was one of those things where I love it, but it wasn't for me. And so what that taught me, though, is so often in life, we see these amazing, amazing athletes and these amazing people that come through, and people will brag on them and compliment them. But the second that they become popular or they become successful, what do people do? They start to hate on them. They start to, hey, you don't get the spotlight anymore. And so what I wanted to do was, especially with my podcast, was I think everybody deserves to be bragged on. Everybody's done something good. Whether that's stopping early, I was talking to you guys earlier, whether that's stopping on the side of the road and running out and moving a turtle across the road, or you've just won OIE and you have the best looking cross gilt that anyone's ever seen and it deserved to win. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where you deserve to be bragged on. And so when I started Brag on Ag, my message was, I want to brag on how agriculture and FFA have positively impacted the lives of others. And so what I was able to do was, hey, let me get you on the podcast. And I started out with some of my friends. I started out with people that really had impacted my life, but also people that deserved to be hyped up. Everybody deserves to have a hype man. Ain't that right? I mean,
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, you guys, you love it. You love it. We talk about clean, powerful, and positive as as a state officer and as FFA members. We want to make sure they're always leaving a positive impact on the lives of others. Isn't that what is it our mission statement? Leaves a positive impact on the lives of others through premier leadership, personal growth, and career success in agricultural education. I probably just butchered that completely, but shows how good of a state officer I was in that instance. But no, that was kind of what I wanted to do. Was I wanted to positively impact others, and so kind of how I started my podcast was I used a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and so what that allowed me to do is I could just simply send a link to somebody through text message or email, and they could join the podcast. And I wouldn't have to drive 3 hours to, let me think. I wouldn't have to drive 3 hours or 4 hours to Thomas, Oklahoma to go record an episode with my friend Ashley. I'd say, hey, Ashley, here's this link. Click on it when you're ready, and you'll join the room. And it's kind of like a Zoom setup. Or, you know what I mean? So we were able to sit there and record. And basically, it was like a phone call. And the way I set up my podcast was, I love podcasts. I love podcasts. I'm a big YouTube guy. My state officer teammates, they'll call me a sticky iPad kid, because whenever we would go on trips, I'd put an AirPod in and I'd be watching a YouTube video or I'd be listening to a podcast. And so it was like one of those things where I wanted to do that. And so I love Joe Rogan. Love the Joe Rogan podcast. And so his is really casual. It's set up and it's like, hey, come on, let's talk about stuff. And that's how I was with Brag on Ag. I would text people. And so I would always do that and have people come on. And from there, it was just kind of set up like that. And we would record and we'd answer questions, or I'd ask them questions. And it was just a casual, run-of-the-mill kind of, hey, let's have a good time. And so that was kind of one of those things. That's how we got started. And like I said earlier, that was my application. I was able to continue to do that and continue to flourish with that. And so that's kind of how Brag on Ag got its start. But kind of how did y'all's podcast kind of get its start? You know what I mean? What's kind of the history with this?
So I can relate like crazy because I also love podcasts and wanted to do something because coming to Crowder, we were a very not productive chapter. Mm-hmm. So I came here taking the job to want to create a premier chapter. What we were going to do, maybe livestock, maybe shooting sports, maybe all of them. But I also wanted to do something unique and different. So my love of podcasting, or just watching podcasts and enjoying vlogs and stuff like that, kind of moved into we can do this kind of stuff in AgCom. Mm. So we started one with a bunch of students, and it was really fun. But Abby, what was your kind of takeover of it? Because it's changed a little bit now. We're doing them during the summer. Mm-hmm. It's more of a prominent thing now because we've got some cool things. We've got a past state officer here now. We've got big things coming in a couple weeks. So Go ahead and talk about your motivation to be on the podcast and take it over.
I really like watching podcasts, so I thought this was really cool and a dream of mine because I've always wanted to do some podcasts, in my car with friends, but then that never happened. And then when I heard this podcast with Meacham, I was like, I should do this. And then later on, I ended up being the new host, and I thought that was amazing to me, and I really started liking it more and just talking about everything. And I thought it was just the coolest thing.
Wow, that's really cool. So he mentioned something earlier. We got some big things planned or big things that's coming. What's coming up?
Can I say it?
You can tell. Maybe we'll edit it out because I would like to keep it a surprise for him.
Okay.
But I want to tell him because he would love it too.
It's
No way. That's awesome, dude. Okay. Is he going to come down here?
He's
Yes.
coming here. He's going to do a vlog with us on his channel.
Wow.
He's going to do a podcast episode with us. So,
it was,
and why is that happening?
I just asked him at convention.
Exactly.
We were at the career fair, and I was like, "Do you want to join?" Who was your favorite guest on your podcast?
So my podcast was always designed like I only ever did one episode where it was just me. And that was like my last episode that I did before I took my long hiatus. And people are still asking me to come back. And I'm like, we're going to see. But every episode was a different guest. And I had some set up where I'd have some repeats, but it would be kind of group settings. But I'd have to say that I have a solid like top three. My number one, I'd have to say, was this guy by the name of Dr. Marshall Swafford. So that man is a great guy, very, very inspirational. One of my mentors, really. I had him on because a buddy of mine was like, hey, there's this professor at Arkansas Tech where he goes to school at. He's like, you got to have him on the pod. He's like, I've told him about it. Like, he loves the idea. He's like, you got to have him on. I was like, I ain't got no idea who this guy is. And so for about a week, we tried to get it to sort out, tried to get the scheduling, and just nothing seemed to work. And then finally, one night, it's about 8 o'clock, and he's like, hey, let's try it one more time. And I'm like, okay. And so I hop on there, and we get on the podcast, and I record, and he really, spoke into my life. Thoroughly changed my life. He went on to be one of my biggest mentors with state office, and has went on to, I am preparing, I'm moving on to the next stages of life, and this man has just really guided me along. So I'd say he's probably my number one. There's a lot of great reasons, but that man right there is just, I cannot thank him enough. He's become one of my greatest friends. Number two, I'd have to say, is probably a man that I hold near and dear to my heart, one of my good friends by the name of Jarrett Davis, old JD. He is a hoot and a holler. I love him so much. He's a good buddy of my ag teachers. And I was talking to him one day, and I had asked him to be on the podcast, and he spoke into my life as well. And it was just, some of my greatest guests were not people that, had all these greatest accomplishments. I loved every one of my guests. There's a reason why I had them on the podcast, But I had him on, and that man really spoke into my life and really helped mentor me and change me in a lot of ways and gave me great mindsets to have and great advice. And so with that, I'd go to number three would probably be my good buddy, Blake Weeks. He was from Meeker FFA. I call him Balake, but Blake, he's a great guy. He's a collegiate livestock judge now at Redlands, and love that guy so much. And so I was able to have him on the pod, and it just was, each one of those was a great time for me as well. It was a great time for my guests, but I had a thoroughly amazing experience with those guys, and they each, not only have they been mentors, but have become great friends and great people I look to. And so I'd say that those are my favorite guests, but getting those guests on was the greatest part. And that's something, have you guys had a lot of guests on the podcast outside of Crowder?
Have we?
We've had other chapters and stuff.
We
Yeah.
had a couple close ones, like Canadians 10 miles away. Hartshorn has brought a student out here. Kiowa was a really good one. They brought 2 students. So that is the awesome part, is we want to brag on our FFA organization as a whole, not just our chapter, right?
Yeah.
So
100%. The greatest piece of advice that I give whenever, because there's other people that have started ag-based podcasts and FFA-based podcasts, and a lot of them, when you want to get a lot of guests on, it's as simple as, hey, if you run into them at state convention, or if you find them on Instagram, you want to know how I got most of my guests on my podcast? I went and found their social media, and I sent them, I copy and pasted this message, and it said, hello, my name is Titus Montgomery. I am from the Red Oak FFA Chapter. I host a podcast that is an ag-based and FFA-oriented podcast called Brag on Ag. Blah, 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 blah. I would love for you to be on it. If you think that this is something that you're kind of a little iffy about, I said, go listen to, and I'd send them a link to my newest episode. Like, listen to it, get an idea. I said, if not, that's fine. 9 times out of 10, you want to know what those people said? Yes. Yes, because what is the one thing that people love more than anything? They love to be able to talk about themselves. Now, people say that, like, I don't mean that in like a negative way, but people love whenever you make them feel like they're heard. And so all the time I'm like, hey, how can we get you on the podcast? And we would do this. And so I would get them on the podcast. I'd send them that text. We'd get everything worked out. And it was as simple as asking them. And so kind of like for you guys, like if you want guests, like it's as simple as saying, hey, you want to be on the podcast? We'd love to have you on. And a lot of the time people are more than likely going to be very, very welcome to coming on. So that's kind of who some of my favorite guests are and how I really got on to getting guests on. And so
I would say our goal from the beginning of this podcast was to get a state officer on here. So you are our first awesome, really exciting guest. But that's how we get the next one that's coming up, and that's how we get better ones in the future. It's just going and asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's you just send them, shoot them a message. Go find their email. Because 9 times out of 10, if they're important or if they're going to be more inclined to answer an email, because if they're not used to an email, oh my gosh, somebody sent me an email, what? Or go text them. Go find their number, or like, you know what I mean? Or go on Instagram or Facebook and say, hey, this is so crazy that I'm messaging you, but would you like to be on our podcast? And if they don't respond, well, that's okay. Wait about 3 days and then text them again. I'm pretty sure that's like the waiting period of double texting somebody. You wait about 3 days and you just send them a message and say, hey, like, you know, we would really love you to. And at the end of the day, if they say no, well, that's okay. Wait a couple months. Say, hey, we'd really love to have you on. You know what I mean? This is something that's really would be awesome for us. So that's kind of how, you know, I think you approach it. And that's how you just approach life. How do you make friends? Say, hey, nice to meet you. My name is so-and-so. Tell me about yourself. Oh, that's really cool. We share something in common. Wow. We both love agriculture and FFA. Wow. It'd be really cool if we talked on a podcast about this. So that's kind of, you know, that's kind of how I look at it. And that's, you know, you guys can really take that and use that, or I don't know. But
we're having so much fun talking with Titus by this time in FFA. We are actually splitting this into 2 parts, and we hope you enjoy this episode of Spilling the Feed and watch part 2.